Good afternoon. Welcome to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Community Planning and Development, Office of Environment and Energy, Assessment Tools for Environmental Compliance webinar. Today's presenter is
Jim Potter.
We'd like to go over a few guidelines for participating in the webinar. The call will last approximately 90 minutes. All callers are muted due to the high number of participants. The webinar will be recorded for future use and made available for viewing and downloading. If you are having audio difficulties, you may want to use your telephone instead of your computer. If you have questions, you are welcome to submit them throughout the webinar presentation using the questions function on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Submit your questions by keying them in the text box through the questions pane on the toolbar. A resource advisor will forward some questions to presenters to answer at the end of the webinar. And now, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Charlie Bean.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on the Assessment Tools for Environmental Compliance, what we call ATEC. Your presenter this afternoon, we're lucky to have, is Jim Potter. Jim was one of the primary authors and designers of this system. He is also our key person on the noise assessment policies, part of which are showing up in this ATEC system. Jim will explain the scope of the tools and techniques that are available, and Jim will walk you through some of the more complicated ones. We think that this system should be of great help to you. It not only states in a fairly simplified manner what are the requirements and what you have to do to comply, it also provides means and ways and techniques of complying in a very, very easy to use format. Without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Jim and welcome you all again.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate that. And thank you all for registering for the webinar. It's going to be interesting. This is one of a series that the Office of Environment and Energy is conducting, and the first of that series. So thanks, and I want to get into the slide that you're looking at now, the ATEC Goals. A lot of these have been, all of these have been achieved by the ATEC project, but probably that first bullet is the most important. The ease of environmental compliance is something that was driving the whole development process. Throughout the years, we've created a lot of guidance and checklists and tools to help environmental compliance with HUD projects, but they weren't in a convenient place. They weren't in a format that was easily accessible. They were manual and sometimes time and labor intensive. And because of that, we wanted to try and shift the focus from record keeping and compliance function to making them so easy that you as project proponents and developers will use them for project planning tools. We want these to be things that you can use in the design phase so that your compliance at the end is really just a documentation process instead of the more onerous and unfortunately traditional role of last-minute changes to meet a regulatory goal. So what is ATEC? Well, the simple definition is that first bullet. It's a centralized collection of tools and resources, and I've shown you a couple of ways that you can get to the ATEC collection there. The way we want to do this is I'm going to show you some of the tools that are available through ATEC. Then we're going to look at some individual topical areas and tools in a little bit more detail. I'm going to temper that a little bit by not trying to steal the thunder of the other 2 webinars that are coming up. And then we're going to go live to the internet to look at where they are, how they work, plug in some numbers, and just play with them a little bit. And after that, then we're going to go to some question and answers to try and address some of your concerns, some of the things I didn't go over well enough, and get you comfortable with it so that when you start playing with it, you're going to feel at ease, that you're going to make these tools more a part of your planning process. Among the different things that are available, fact sheets, guidance, outreach contacts, all of these different things that you'll find very helpful in complying with environmental regulations. Some of we've seen some changes lately with the advent of the financial crisis, the housing crisis. There are a lot of folks now accessing federal projects and programs that never thought of doing it before. And because of that, they're not familiar with the regulations and the requirements, the paperwork, the documentation requirements, the timelines. There are some things that are a little bit different. And on top of that, HUD has some regulations that are a little bit different from others. So your typical NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act person, someone trained in NEPA's requirements, may not know about, for example, the noise requirement or the environmental justice executive order or wetlands and floodplains requirement. There are some unique functions to HUD and HUD funding that you'll need to address, and ATEC's going to help you with that through these tools that we've collected. So now, like I said, I just want to show you a few examples of the kinds of tools you'll find in ATEC. They are context sensitive. So not every tool is going to have a fact sheet like this one for accident potential zones. But there are these kinds of tools in each of the different ATEC areas. This particular one is interesting in that the accident potential zones are very spatial. So the diagram on page 2 shows you exactly what those dimensions mean and how they lay out in relation to the end of the runway. If you look at the top right corner of the first page on the left, this is the format that we're trying to follow throughout and to standardize. You'll see the authority for this particular regulation. You'll see the purpose that we're trying to achieve. And then we try to state that purpose and what we're trying to achieve in simple language that you can understand and you can communicate to others on the design team so that everybody understands what our intent is and how we're going to go about doing that. And then from there, the rest of the text on the page is questions, like frequently asked questions that might be addressed. There may be the process you go through for analyzing this particular topic. Context sensitive again, so they're going to change by area, but this is the basic layout for fact sheets. Guidance examples, pulled this one at random. Environmental justice doesn't have a lot of other tools, so it's primarily all guidance. This tries to give you a definition of environmental justice, the Executive Order 12898 that is the guideline for and the basis for our environmental justice concerns, and a few other things about environmental justice. The main thing you really need to understand about EJ is that we're trying to be fair to everyone, and we're trying to make it a part of our mission, of our everyday exercise. It should not be something special that happens just to comply with a particular executive order. This is something we're trying to do as a natural part of all of the department's outreach and work. So in a nutshell, that's the kind of guidance that we're trying to provide through things like the Environmental Justice ATEC link. Flowchart examples. They get a lot worse than this one. This really isn't too bad. This is on floodplains, and again, it's a decision tree to try and help you walk through the process. Some of them will define the documentation process, the design process, context sensitive again. So we're trying to give you information in a format that you can readily use and communicate that is directly applicable to what you're trying to achieve. Checklist. The particular one that I've pulled here is the backbone for our environmental compliance and assessment. It's the HUD Form 4128. It's the checklist that really is the framework for everything that you're going to do to comply with HUD's requirements. And it's relatively good. We're looking at some improvements, but this one generally covers everything you're going to need to worry about with HUD projects and environmental compliance. Checklists like this are available from your local, the individual regions where the projects are located. Some of the regions have got special spreadsheets and checklists like this because they've got special requirements. So later on, you're going to see the contact list for field staff. I'd encourage you, strongly encourage you, to reach out to your field staff. We've got a terrific team of professionals in the field, over 30 professionals across the country that are schooled in these requirements and compliance with HUD's rules. They can help you. They want to help you. They want to make the best projects that HUD can be involved with. So we're all trying to do the same thing, and they can certainly help you. Checklists are just one way, and outreach to the regions underscores all the things I think we're going to talk about today. Calculators. We've recently, within the last 4 years or so, developed several calculators. The particular one I've pulled out here is for acceptable separation distance. Again, that's one of those requirements that you won't find in the typical NEPA analysis. It's a HUD-specific requirement. But it's something that's very important. With this one, we're trying to keep people safe and save lives. So it's important in the site planning process, and this particular tool creates, or when you input the different parameters of your project with regard to explosive and flammable facilities in the vicinity of your project, it'll tell you how far away you need to be from a particular hazard in order to keep your project and the inhabitants of that project safe. But this is just one example. We've also developed noise calculator to generate the noise exposure of a particular site from a variety of different noise generators. We've developed a mitigation tool so that you can check the performance of a noise wall or a blast wall in the case of acceptable separation distance to determine the attenuation mitigation value of that structure and how much that's going to reduce the exposure of your site at that particular location. These are really valuable, and they also have streamlined a relatively labor-intensive process. Those of you familiar with the noise guidebook, for example, know the worksheets that we've been using for the last 30 years and how much time goes into the calculations for there. On my bookcase here, I've got the technical background for that noise assessment guideline, and they did a wonderful job of simplifying some very complex equations into the graphs and charts that you've been using. We've taken that approach one step further and made it electronic, made it available through the web anytime, anywhere, to anyone. And we've also reduced the typical calculation time from a couple of hours to a couple of minutes. We've done them in less than 30 seconds. I mean, there's a tremendous productivity enhancement that's happened through the development of these tools, and we want to make them available to you, and we want to make you aware that you can really use these things for what-if scenarios, like we talked about earlier in the goals. This is a listing. This is the actual index from the Assessment Tools for Environmental Compliance webpage. Each of these are hot links to the different topical areas that we have tools available for. Some of them will look very familiar to you. Others are, like I said, specific to HUD. If you're not familiar with HUD's requirements, you're going to be scratching your head at this point. But all of these things need to be at least considered, often addressed. There are a few in there that need a little more attention than others. There are some, like the Section 106 compliance requirements under historic preservation, that have long lead times. They require a lot of attention up front to get the consultation process started, to schedule public meetings if that's necessary, to reach out to different stakeholder groups to find out, if you've assessed the problem correctly, if they agree with it, if they're willing to support the project. So there's a lot of different requirements. Like I said, some of them are time, some of them are compliance. All of them affect your project schedule and budget. So think about it, and this index will allow you to help structure your planning process a little bit, as well as the compliance on the back end. Talked about airport clear zones a little bit earlier. This is the blow-up of that diagram that I talked about. The regulatory citation from HUD is 24 CFR Code of Federal Regulations 51D, subpart 51D. The ATEC resources that are available on that link from this index are frequently asked questions. That's pretty standard among all of them. We've got a lot of questions that have been generated over the years, and we've collected the most popular, the most required information, and put them on the website so that you can easily find the answers to the most common questions. Sample buyer's notice is something peculiar to airport clear zones. If a project is going to be developed in the accident potential zone, you need to notify the buyers that their project, their structure, is located in such a zone, and the implications, potential implications of that. So a sample notice to buyers is included within the tools in ATEC. So this has a fact sheet and some guidance to give you some background on what we're trying to achieve. Coastal Areas Protection, the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, has been around for a little bit, but it often needs explanation. It's a little bit difficult for folks to get their heads wrapped around. It doesn't apply to all states. It doesn't apply in a variety of different areas, but it does apply in some places you wouldn't necessarily think of it, like the Great Lakes. The ATEC resources that are available are frequently asked questions. The graphic that you see there on the bottom right is the first page, the title page of the training presentation that's available that steps you through the details of compliance. And there are also within ATEC and within the training presentation links to the Fish and Wildlife Service guidance. Fish and Wildlife is the lead agency on Coastal Barrier Resources Act and its compliance. There's also, by the way, a move right now to create new, more precise digital maps of all of the barrier resources. So if you're used to working with this in the past, keep checking in with Fish and Wildlife, because they've got updates that may help you almost immediately. Floodplain management and wetlands protection. This is overseen by the Executive Order 11988, and it's codified in 24 CFR 55. We've also just recently we've been working on an update to that regulation, and I believe I heard the most recent information is that it's made it through the public comment period, and we'll have a new regulation very soon. So keep an eye out for that as well. The ATEC resources are FAQs, process flow chart you saw earlier and is at the bottom right, as well as a narrative to explain all of that and the 8-step process that goes along with it, and links to other federal agency resources and guidance. We're not the lead on this, but we and our projects need to comply with Corps of Engineers and NOAA and the other agencies that have more direct links to the law and the executive order. Hazardous substances. We talked about this briefly earlier. It's 24 CFR subpart 51C. Frequently asked questions, the calculator we discussed, mitigation options module, a barrier mitigations module. The options module, you'll see in a little bit, is really just guidance. It has some sketches of different barrier configurations, so it allows you to to pick the right configuration for your particular situation, or at least something close to it, to help you with the calculation process and what the dimensions you're going to need mean and where they get applied. There's also a training presentation available through ATEC on hazardous materials. The ASD Calculator is a little more detail about it. Like I said, I don't want to steal the thunder. On Monday the 24th, we're going to have the third of this series, and that particular webinar is going to feature the acceptable separation distance assessment tool in great detail. So Nelson Rivera, who is the mastermind behind all our calculations and things mathematical, is going to be presenting that. And you're going to get a lot of good information that's going to help you walk through the ASD process and what the considerations are, as well as where you can get the data that drives the whole calculation process. There's a few ideas here about where ASD information can be found, but Nelson will go into a lot more detail about that later. Mitigation options. Like I said, this is really just some guidance to help you walk through the process. That's pretty self-explanatory, I hope. The scenarios that you see in the second bullet of the bottom box are actual sketches so that you can look at how for example, a noise source and an observer and a barrier all relate to one another, so you can determine which dimensions go where and which ones are applied to your particular project and what kind of information you need to collect. This one is historic preservation, is, like I said earlier, is something that's very important to a lot of HUD projects, as well as, how do I state this? Like I said, there's a lot of lead time required for historic preservation. There's a consultation process that has to be worked through, and it can take a lot of time. Each step could be 30 to 45 days, where you put out information or an opinion and wait for someone to get back to you. So the more planning you put into that up front and as early as possible, the better. The guidance on ATEC will help you understand what the requirements are and what the basic time frames are. The ATEC resources are listed there. The flow chart you see on the bottom right, granted, is extremely complicated, but it will really help you walk through how you do the 106 consultation process, who needs to be involved and where. The one thing I will point out in that flow chart are those big red stop signs. There are 4 basic stages to the 106 process. At any one of them, if you have a finding of no significant effect, you're done. So this isn't something that's necessarily onerous, but it's something you need to understand and work into your process. And we've done some studies with other HUD projects and have found there's a tremendous correlation between the cost of projects and the time or the point in the process at which environmental compliance has begun. The short story is the earlier the better, the earlier the cheaper. So look at some of these tools, some of the ATEC resources, and use them to design your process. Use them to determine the timeline. It'll really help you out in the long run. The last bullet under ATEC resources for historic preservation I wanted to point out to you. I'll go into more detail in a little bit, but we are redeveloping the tribal directory assessment tool. I would say update, but it's really a total redesign of the tool as it stands today. So keep an eye out for that. You're going to be seeing another webinar on that in the near future, I think November. But I don't believe we have a date on that yet. But stay tuned. We'll let you know more details as they come out, and we'll send out notices. That might be something that you really want to flag for your schedule to make sure that you attend that one. The Basic 106 training course. Like I said, 106 is a complex process that has implications in a variety of different ways. Cost and time are the biggest ones. But because there's so much to deal with, so many moving parts, that we're very fortunate to get funding for a training course that has a variety of different modules that will teach you all the things you need to know about the process from start to finish. So this one introduces the 106. It helps you with the process, but it can also be used for folks that are familiar with it or maybe don't do it that often, just to refresh your memory about what happens at different stages or who needs to know what, when, what kind of information I need to collect. It's really a very useful thing that you can jump in and out of as you need to either teach yourself what the thing is from the beginning or to refresh your memory about it, specific items within the process. Another 106 tool in ATEC is the Programmatic Agreement database. Now this is simply is probably a difficult word to use, but it really is just a collection of the programmatic agreements that we've found over that we've entered into over the years and our grantees have entered into over the years. We've put them in a format where they're searchable by geography and lists. So you can look for all of the programmatic agreements in your jurisdiction. You can look for all of the programmatic agreements in your state. You can do it graphically through that map you see on the middle of the page in the graphic, or you can do it by the list of states at the bottom. We're constantly updating this, so if you have a recently completed programmatic agreement, send it to us and we'll put it in here. The goal of this is to provide a template so that your next programmatic agreement doesn't have to start from a blank page, that you have some idea of what's been accepted before, how different jurisdictions have addressed the same problem, and how you might mold that solution into something that will work for you. So it's kind of just what we used to call a go-by. But I think it's going to be very important, and you're going to find it very valuable. TDAT, I just talked about a while ago, the Tribal Directory Assessment Tool. What you see here in the graphic is the current contact database. We've reached out to tribal leadership and tribal historic preservation officers to develop not only a list of their contact information, but what's really interesting about this is that we also have asked them for their counties of interest. At the county level, we know where they want to be involved. So if your project, you can enter the county of your project and find out who you need to contact and then find out how to do that through the listing of their contact information. It's a really valuable tool and something that's part of a tribal consultation process that is being revamped and updated and will be available soon. And we have a new preservation officer who's been working diligently on that. And I'm not going to steal Nancy's thunder either. So that Section 106 and the TDAT webinar in November will, I'm sure, touch on at least some of that. Stay tuned. Noise abatement and control. If I go into too much detail about this one, stop me, because this is what I do primarily. But I wanted to point out a couple of things that are available through ATEC training presentations. We've got a couple of different training presentations. The noise guidebook is available through the website. We also have a day-night noise level calculator. The latest tool that we've added to the arsenal is the Sound Transmission Classification Assessment Tool. I've got a slide on that in a little bit, but StrayCat is something that I think once you get used to and once you start working with, you're going to find invaluable. It's something that, frankly, was kind of a sort of a black box that was very difficult to understand, and I think we've made it a little clearer with the tool that we've developed here. It's an automated version of the Figure 19 for those of you that are familiar with the noise assessment process, and I think you're going to like it. So give it a try. This is a little more information about the DNL Calculator. Like I said, I'm not going into a lot of detail because tomorrow at the same time we're going to be looking at noise and noise assessments in great detail. If you're interested in that, please register for that webinar and join the crowd, because we're going to be talking a lot about how you use this calculator and some of the site planning that you can do with the DNL Calculator. One thing I wanted to point out, that first bullet there, is that, and something peculiar to HUD, actually, is that you need information about the noise generators 10 years in the future. Typically about midway through the lifespan of a HUD project, and it's also a reasonable length of time for data to be available. Most of the noise sources that we track are transportation sources, and state transportation improvement plans are typically done on a 20-year cycle. So getting information 10 years out, traffic projections, for example, are usually not too difficult. So we're looking for something not today, but in the foreseeable future. And there are a lot of sources for that information. Local planning departments, state DOTs, railroads are among our noise sources that we track and assess, and railroad operators are another one of the sources of information that you'll need to reach out to. One peculiarity of the DNL calculator is that you should always start with a road. That's usually not difficult, but in occasions, we've had projects where they decided that the street out front was not a major road, did not need to be assessed, and didn't bother with it because they saw the challenge as the railroad in the back or the airport down the street. But for the DNL calculator, you need to start with a road, even if the box is blank. Add a road, and then add whatever else you need to do. The other thing is the vehicle type line at the top of that input box needs to be checked. You need to check the vehicle types before you can input data below in that column. Those are the only real tricks, and you're also going to find this very useful. Like I said before, the manual version, which is completely compatible with this, by the way. We've done extensive testing to make sure that you get the same answer from each source. But the manual method typically requires about 2 hours of input time. This can be done in a minute or two, literally. So you're going to find it very valuable, and I hope you use this for your site planning as well as your compliance requirements. The barrier performance module. If you look at just above the input data box at the top there, you'll see road rail site DNL. If you do it linearly, if you do it in the way that we've designed it, which was go to the DNL calculator first and find out what your site exposure is and then mitigate, that will be filled in for you by the DNL calculator. If you can do it in another order, but you just have to be a little more cognizant of what the numbers are and how you're going to use them. The barrier, what's the trick about the barrier? Barrier height, H, must break the line of sight. That means that the observer, the resident in the apartment building or the resident of the single-family house or whatever the observer, however you define the observer, must not be able to see the noise source. Let me restate that. Must not be able to see the noise source. Psychoacoustic studies have shown that if they can see it, they think they hear it, even if they can't hear it. That's, how you feel about the noise is almost as important as what you can actually see about the noise. So you need to make sure that barrier is not going to be effective if they can see over it, and it's not going to stop the noise because the noise is air pressure. The air pressure is going to go right over the top, and it's not going to be effective. You will have wasted your money. So the barrier performance module will help you address some of those issues. Two other things I want to point out about this slide before we move on. In the input box, the bottom right, the alpha that's listed there is the angle that the barrier intersects. Angle that the barrier intersects. If you look down on it from satellite imagery from Google Earth or from TerraServer or some other, plug in the name of your choice, it will show you can map the observer location and the ends of the barriers. If you draw lines between those 3 points, that is the angle that we're talking about. The other thing I want to point out is the output data. If you see on the bottom right, there's a box labeled FS. That's cryptic. Sorry about that. We were going for compatibility with the manual version, and that's the way the book uses it. But that FS is actually the mitigation of the barrier. That is the amount of noise that the barrier decreases the exposure by. So if you look at where we started at 64.283 at the top, and the new site DNL, 55.6457 at the bottom, the difference is that FS, 8.6373. Other than that, you've got it. That's the barrier performance. Stray Cat, Sound Transmission Classification Assessment Tool. This is the newest addition to ATEC. It's still in its infancy. We haven't had a lot of traffic on it that I know of, so I'm hoping that a lot of you are going to take advantage of this awareness and try it out. It's meant to automate the figure 19 in the noise guidebook, which is the noise assessment. The noise assessment. It's actually the amount of attenuation that the wall of the building generates, so that that's how much the outdoor noise is reduced for the interior exposure. Our interior standard for noise is 45 decibels. The outdoor acceptable level, outdoor acceptable threshold is 65. And as part of the regulation, it states that, with normal construction for your region, if the outdoor noise is acceptable, the indoor noise is acceptable. And you can restate that to say that a typical wall in your region provides 20 decibels of attenuation, 65 minus 45. That's the calculation Stray Cat does. For different windows and different thicknesses of walls, different materials of walls, it will calculate what that attenuation value is. Now, in order to do that, of course, you need that information. You need the architectural details about what the construction is, what the area of the wall is, the type, size, and number of windows, and the same information for the doors. Input all that data into those input boxes, and you will get not only what the sound level, the interior sound level is, but also whether it's acceptable or not. It doesn't meet the requirements. The assessment tools for environmental compliance is pretty straightforward, but you're going to have questions. I'm sure you'll have questions, and there'll be peculiarities to your site and your region that you'll need to know more about. And there are the field environmental staff as well as headquarters subject matter experts that can help you with those things. We're also always looking to make improvements to the assessment tools for environmental compliance. And the bottom left there, atec@hud.gov, is the email address for sending your suggestions and concerns to us. We can address them and hopefully make those improvements relatively quickly. Now, this slide isn't meant to be legible, but I wanted to point out just how many, I want to show you just how many environmental staff are available in the various regions to help out. There's a lot of people. They're really good, very professional staff. They've got years of experience with this, and they can help out with those peculiarities. ATEC is going to help you with the commonplace. It's going to help you with the routine questions and the routine calculations. But there will be situations that require a little more finesse, a little more experience, and we're hoping that that's what the environmental staff can help you with. This contact list is available on the HUD.gov website. It's on the OEE website, and those folks are willing and able to help you. So give them a call, get to know them. Now, before we go to there, I've gotten a couple of questions already. I'm going to put them off for just a moment, or maybe I'll address them while we look at ATEC Live. So bear with me for just a second. We're going to switch to the web page. This is HUD.gov, www.hud.gov. Like I showed you earlier in the slides, there are several ways to get to the assessment tools for environmental compliance. I'm going to show you the one that I think is the simplest. From HUD.gov, go to topical areas, go to Environment, click on Environment, and near the bottom of that page, you'll find the logo and a hot link to the assessment tools. Click on either one of those, and this is the index page that I showed you earlier. All right. Let's look at a few of these. We might as well start at the top of the page, right, since we're doing this randomly. As you can see, airport hazards question and answer, some of the basics. Let me show you what the buyer's guide looks like, or the buyer's notification rather looks like. This is a PDF file. Basically, it's just a template to allow you to notify people of what the implications are and some instructions about how to fill it out. Before we leave that one, I had a question about airport clear zones. The question was, when a civil airport has military aircraft that fly out, what criteria would it be? What criteria would be used? The answer to that one is worst case. And this is a good data question, too. The military has a requirement to provide information to the public about noise and airport operations that affect the public outside the fence. ACUs, the Air Installation Compatibility Use Zone, is the Department of Defense instruction that requires them to assess their impacts as well as report their impacts. Every installation that makes noise, that has airplanes, that loud impulse sounds is another one that we didn't talk about, and I'm trying not to go into too much detail here because I don't want to ruin tomorrow for you. But if they create noise and they have airport clear zones, they document them and they must share them. So contact the operator, contact the whether it's a civil airport or a military airport, to find out what their requirements are. That's also important because those requirements might change. If they are planning, for example, a runway extension 5 years out in their capital improvements plan, you would need to know the ultimate clear zone boundary. So talk to the planners at the airport, military or civil, and find out what the worst case is. Typically, in the example of the question, military is going to be the worst case. So talk to them, find out what their requirements are, and they will help you not only with today's answer, but also with what they're planning for the future. Let's pick another one to look at, hazardous substances. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. Nelson's going to be doing a webinar specifically on this topic on Monday the 24th, but I wanted to just give you a little preview. Again, there's a little bit of guidance on what we're talking about, how to try and frame the issue. And then the acceptable separation tool is just a hot link from that page. We have flowcharts. There's a user's guide, see on the far right there under the ATEC logo. There's a user's guide for how to go through this if you have any questions about what needs to be input where. A nice feature about this particular calculator is that as you answer these questions about the hazard at your particular site, different boxes become available based on the answers. So if you're dealing with gases, you get one set of questions. If you're dealing with liquids that are not under pressure, you get another set of input boxes. And that steps you through the process and really makes it bulletproof, makes it very difficult to make an error. Let's take a look at Section 106 checklist. We've talked a lot about that. This is an example of a checklist, and this steps you through the process for doing a 106 compliance review. As you can see, there's references to the regulations, so that if you need more detail about what that question is asking, you can go right to the source. There's guidance on what to do in different situations. Each step of the process is defined. It's a very useful tool. Coastal zone management. I wanted to show you this one because it's not, ATEC is not just HUD. Like I said before, there are different agencies that have the lead for different regulations, and this is one of them. Coastal zone management is handled by the National Oceanographic and Aeronautic Administration. So since we are not the experts, we point you to the ones that are. They've got contacts, local contacts for information, and we've made that available. And as they keep their information up to date, we pass it on to you. So through these hot links, you can get the latest and best information on how to work with your project. I'll take one more, and then we're going to move on to questions. As I said before, this is the Tribal Directory Assessment Tool. This is the current version. I showed you in the slide what the output looks like, but let's just pick one at random. Alaska's got a lot of, does not exist. Isn't that cool? California's got a lot of tribes also. And this is the kind of output that you get. So you can define it. This is the total state. As you can see down in the bottom right here, there are 28 pages of contacts. You can look for the county of interest and find it. This is a very static report on tribal interest and activities. It's also a little bit out of date. This was developed about 2 years ago, and it's one of the reasons why we're revamping the system now. It's the new system is going to be more geographic in format and operation. You're going to be able to type in the county and get the information more specifically rather than pages and pages of reports such as this. But the idea is the same, and the counties of interest for the tribes is what's really valuable to us. We really are very excited about this tool. You're going to get a preview of it in November, so I'd encourage you to sign up for that one. All right, let's go to questions. I can push the right button here. All right. So the next question. For the sake of clarification, does a reviewer run the calculations just on projected numbers or once for present data and once for future data? That's a good one. We don't really need present data. If you look at the regulation, there is a note about the need for 10-year data. Projections of noise exposure. And this is, by the way, 51106D. I'm sorry, E. In addition to assessing existing exposure, future conditions should be projected. To the extent possible, noise exposure shall be projected to the representative or to be representative of conditions that are expected to exist at least 10 years beyond the date of the project or action under review. You'll notice some keywords in there, to the extent possible, and that brings up another good point, that we're looking for best available data. So when I said that 10-year data is generally available, it is, but it may not have been updated on the timetable that we need. Maybe they are 19 years into their 20-year projection, and they're going to be doing a comprehensive plan 6 months from now, and you can't wait. So the best available data is fine. But because of that subsection in the regulation, we don't need a present-day calculation of noise. The 10-year is fine. The best available data, the furthest out, they've got a projection that's only 8 years out. If you can extrapolate it, great, but if not, use the best available data. I hope that helps. Another question. Can you add 2x6 R21 wood walls to the options for the sound transmission classification assessment tool? Yes, we can, but not easily. The electronic tool that we've developed is pretty static, and we haven't had the opportunity to make improvements to it yet. In the case of requiring different materials or thicknesses or construction methods, then we have options for, and I could quickly go into that. Let me just show you what Stray Cat looks like. As you can see from this drop-down list, we have a lot of different options for wall configurations, sizes, materials. They are the same ones that you've seen in the noise guidebook. There's no new information here. What we've done is automate the calculation process. We have not done research on new materials, new construction methods. We have linked that list to the diagrams so that you can understand what kind of wall we're doing. Again, it's the same kind of thing that you saw in the Chapter 4 supplement for the noise guidebook. It's the same format that's used in all of the different documentation of STCs. We're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible, but that is one of the future additions that we'd like to make, and in the future update of the Stray Cat, we will certainly be adding a little bit more flexibility into it. If you need that now, though, I'd recommend that you go to the manual method, go to the noise guidebook, figure 19, plug in your information. The only thing I'd ask you to do there is to find a legitimate source for the sound transmission classification rating. That classification should come from an independent third party, a laboratory like Underwriters or the NASA Sound Lab. There's a few others that do STC calculations. It is an involved process. What I don't want to see, what we don't want to see, is a memo from the marketing department of the manufacturer saying this is super fantastic stuff that has a mitigation, this quarter-inch plywood that we've developed with a piece of film on top gives you 97 decibels of attenuation. Sorry, I'm going to need a little bit more than that. Find a legitimate source, find a third party, preferably an independent third party, and we can certainly work with you on what kinds of information that can be input through the figure 19. That's all the questions that I have. I've gotten a few others actually, but we're going to be creating a log. A log has been generated of all the questions, and we're going to be answering them, and that will be part of the website. If we don't put it on the website, I'll address the questions individually to those that ask them. But I did want to thank you for attending the webinar. There's going to be an online evaluation form sent to each of the registered participants. Please fill that out and send it back to us. It's really the only way that we get to know how well we've done and what improvements we can make in the future. As I told you earlier, this is the first of a series, so your feedback is critically important to us so that we can make products that are more useful to you in the future. Tomorrow, by the way, that future starts a little quickly. We're going to be doing the noise assessment webinar. If you want to get a head start on it, go to ATEC, look at the training module. It's very similar to that. tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern, we're going to be doing the same thing. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you. The webinar is now ending.